They say the sky over Ash Hollow bleeds red when something wicked's about to happen. That night, under a swollen blood moon, the wind whistled low across the dust-cracked earth, rattling dead branches and creaking weathered signs. The saloon doors flapped lazily in the breeze, echoing like bones knocking together. Inside, men drank like the world was ending, and maybe it was. No one noticed the figure standing still as a gravestone across the street, coat black with soot, hat brim shadowing his face. Only the old drunk, Pa Wilkes, squinted through the bottle-glass window and muttered, his back. On the northern edge of town, flames erupted from the Larkin Ranch. 1 second it was darkness and silence. The next, a thunderous whoosh and a pillar of fire licking the sky. The screams came a heartbeat later. Lena Larkin's voice was first, sharp as a blade, cutting through the howl of fire. Her husband, Amos, yelled over her for the children. Windows burst. Horses screamed. Ash Hollow came running, but not fast enough. The stranger moved first. Before the townsfolk had even gathered their wits, he was already charging toward the blaze. No one recognized him up close. His duster was scorched and patched, boots caked in red desert clay, the kind that doesn't wash out easy. He kicked through the door just as the roof began to sag. "Someone stop him," a voice cried, but no one did. Minutes passed like hours. The fire roared. Sparks spun into the night like vengeful spirits. Then, he emerged, carrying a boy no older than 6, face buried in the man's shoulder. Behind him, the girl stumbled out coughing, barely standing. The stranger turned back once more. Inside, Amos Larkin's voice bellowed, then went silent. He came out again, this time with Lena, her dress in flames, her arms curled around a burned blanket. The crowd gasped, but he didn't pause. He laid them gently down on the dirt and stepped back, eyes scanning the sky, the fire, the crowd, as if expecting something more to come. Then he walked away, not toward the saloon, not toward the sheriff's office. He disappeared into the dark between the buildings, vanishing like he'd never been there at all. Sheriff Tobias Cray arrived 10 minutes later, pants pulled over long johns, boots half-laced. He took one look at the Larkin family and another at the house now little more than a skeletal frame of cinders. "Who pulled him out?" he asked, breath short. "Stranger," said Pa Wilkes, wide-eyed. Didn't say a word. Just walked in like death had called his name. Cray frowned. Which way'd he go? No one knew. Later, they found something behind the house, half buried in the sand. A flattened brass coin with strange markings no one recognized. It smelled faintly of sulfur. That night, the Larkins lived, but just barely. Amos had second-degree burns. Lena's arms were raw. The boy and girl had smoke in their lungs. But they were alive, thanks to a man no one could name. By morning, stories had already begun to sprout. Some said he was a ranch hand who'd lost his family in a fire years ago. Others swore he was a bounty hunter cursed by a dying outlaw. One man insisted he was no man at all, but the ghost of someone burned in the war between the states. The sheriff posted a notice, seeking information on the man who saved the Larkins. Reward and gratitude. No questions asked. No one came forward. Not the next day. Not the next week. Not ever. And so the tale of the stranger who walked into fire began. The children would one day say he had eyes that glowed in the smoke. The town preacher claimed he didn't leave footprints. And old Pa Wilkes, he just shook his head and muttered, "Some debts ain't paid with silver, boys. Some men walk this earth looking to pay with their souls." Whatever the truth was, one thing remained. The fire had not started by accident. Someone had struck the match, and whoever that someone was, the stranger had already gone looking. Sheriff Tobias Cray stood over the scorched ruins of the Larkin Ranch, hat in hand, eyes squinting against the morning glare. The ground was still warm beneath his boots. Ash clung to everything like regret. A ribbon of black smoke drifted skyward, curling like a question left unanswered. He crouched beside what remained of the back porch and traced his fingers over something etched into the date, half melted by heat, but deliberate. A circle, 3 slashes through it, and the faint outline of a bootprint leading west. He stood up slow. "I've seen that mark before," came a voice behind him. It was Preacher Olden, silver-bearded, leaning on his cane like it held back his memories. Back in '64, after the burning of Wounded Hill. Same sigil. Same fire. Cray's brow furrowed. That was a war story. War or not, someone's dragging ghosts through our town. The Larkin family recovered at the doctor's home. Lena's arms were wrapped tight in linens soaked with salve. Amos lay silent, skin bubbled along his shoulders, eyes never quite meeting anyone's. The children, Daisy and Jonah, clung to each other like shipwreck survivors. Cray sat on the edge of Lena's bed. He said gently, "Do you remember anything about who set that fire?" Her voice was sandpaper. I smelled kerosene. Heard horses. A man laughing. She paused, trembling. But the one who came in, he didn't laugh. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like he'd lost someone too. Cray nodded slowly, then turned to Amos. "You said you did words with Duke Mallory last week. Over land." Amos didn't speak for a long time. Then, "Duke sent men to survey our northern line. Said the deed we had was soft paper. I told him to leave. Said I'd shoot next time. Guess he lit a match instead." Cray's jaw tensed. "And the stranger?" Amos finally met his eyes. "He didn't save us for thanks. He saved us like it was a job he'd failed at before." Out on the mesa, wind cut through the rocks like a whisper. The stranger knelt beside a low stone cross buried under years of dust. He cleaned the name with K. Caleb Reed, 1865. Son. Dreamer. Lost in fire. The stranger's fingers trembled as they brushed the letters. He closed his eyes, let the wind rattle his coat, and for a moment, he was back there. In the flames, the screams, the helplessness, the smell of charred wood and burnt flesh. He opened his eyes, and he remembered why he had come. Back in town, Preacher Olden poured 2 glasses of rye and handed one to Cray. The church office was dark, cool, and lined with ancient books. Above the desk hung a faded tintype photograph of 10 soldiers, faces half lost to time. Cray pointed. "That one. 3rd from left." The preacher nodded. "Silas Reed." "The stranger." "I. Rode under General Crowley. Quiet man. Good with a rifle. Lost his boy in a Union raid. After the war, became a bounty hunter. Said he was hunting the devil who lit the match." Cray's eyes narrowed. "That was 20 years ago. Some wounds don't close, Sheriff." Cray sipped his rye. "And the sigil? Reed used to carve it into trees when he took vengeance. His mark. 3 slashes through the past." By sundown, the town buzzed with quiet tension. Mallory's riders had been seen north of the canyon, and someone had left a warning nailed to the church door. "Back down or bane again." Cray posted deputies. Men double-bolted their doors. The desert seemed to lean in closer. Then, like smoke rising from the earth, the stranger returned. He walked straight through the middle of Ash Hollow, boots kicking up dust, eyes forward, untouched by stares or whispers. He passed the saloon, the mercantile, and the sheriff's office without stopping. Only one man spoke. "You ain't real," Pa Wilkes muttered from his bench. The stranger paused, tilted his head. "Neither's peace," he replied, and kept walking. That night, Cray found him sitting at the war memorial, hands folded over the stock of a worn lever-action rifle. The badge from the old Confederate days still hung on his chest, worn, dull, a relic from another life. "I know who you are now," Cray said quietly. Silas didn't look up. "Doesn't matter. It matters to me. It matters to this town." Silas turned then, and his eyes held the weight of fire and blood. "Your town's being eaten from the inside. Duke's buying justice, burning names, and you're patching bullet holes with bandages." Cray clenched his jaw. "You think killing him changes anything?" "No," Silas said, "but it stops him from lighting the next fire." The wind howled down from the cliffs that framed Ash Hollow, dragging cold dust through the main road like a warning. By morning, Silas Reed had taken up silent watch on the church steps, his rifle leaning beside him like an old friend. He didn't speak, didn't move unless necessary. Townsfolk passed wide around him. Children stared. The brave ones whispered, "He's waiting for the devil." They weren't far off, because by mid-afternoon, Duke Mallory rode into town. Duke was the kind of man who wore money like armor, silver conchos, pearl-handled revolvers, and a coat cut from black velvet. His boots shone brighter than the soles of the men who rode with him, and his mustache curled like a villain from one of Miss Talbot's dime novels. He didn't ride alone. 5 riders flanked him, mean-eyed men with worn rifles and fresh cigars. As they trotted down the street, people disappeared into shops and behind shutters. Duke tipped his hat to no one. At the sheriff's office, he dismounted and strutted through the door without knocking. Sheriff Cray looked up from his desk. "Afternoon, Duke." Duke smiled wide, all teeth, no warmth. "Sheriff, I heard one of your citizens played hero the other night. Thought I'd come extend my condolences." "Condolences for what?" "Well, I imagine it's hard for a man like you, trying to keep order when outsiders stir things up. Fires, legends, whispers. Very unstable climate for business." Cray's hand hovered near his belt. "You accusing someone, Duke?" "Not at all," Duke said smoothly. "But let's be honest, Tobias, this town needs peace, not ghosts with grudges. I suggest you send your mysterious friend on his way before things get unfortunate." Cray stood. "That stranger saved a family. I won't turn him away." Duke's smile faded just a fraction. "Then it'll be your fire next." Outside, Silas watched Duke's gang gather near the saloon, their laughter oily and loud. He didn't blink when they spit near the preacher. Didn't flinch when one kicked over a beggar's hat. He only stood once, when Duke walked back out. The two men locked eyes in the open street. Silas didn't speak, but the weight of his stare stopped Duke cold. Duke's jaw tensed. "You think you're some kind of savior." Silas stepped forward. "I think you're the match in a dry barn." A hush fell over the street. Even the wind paused. Duke sneered. "You're still chasing ghosts, Reed. Still thinking fire is something you can control." Silas said nothing, just stared. It was Duke who looked away first. That night, Silas visited the burned husk of the Larkin Ranch alone. He walked its perimeter slowly, noting charred footprints, collapsed beams, the melted remains of a child's wooden toy. He stopped where the porch once stood on Saturday. From his coat, he drew a small tin box and opened it. Inside were pieces of the past, a lock of blonde hair, a letter charred at the corners, a gold ring engraved with C.R. My Sunday. He closed the lid with reverence. "Your fire still burns, Caleb," he whispered to the night. "But I won't let it spread." Meanwhile, Sheriff Cray met with Preacher Alden and Doc Merriweather in the church basement. "He won't leave," Cray said, "and Duke won't back down." Alden frowned. "Then it'll end in blood." Cray nodded grimly. "I think that's what Silas wants." Doc rubbed his temples. He lost his son to fire. Now he wants to burn away the men who lit it. "And if Duke didn't start this one?" Cray asked. The room went silent. Preacher Alden finally said, "Then the man we think is our salvation might be something else entirely." The next dawn, the sky burned red again. Smoke rolled across the horizon, not from the Larkin place this time, but from the Wilkes homestead, just 3 miles out. By the time Cray and his deputies arrived, it was too late. The house was ash. Pa Wilkes was gone. All that remained was the same strange sigil, circle and 3 slashes, carved into the barn door, and a single silver spur in the date. Cray picked it up slowly. It wasn't Reed's. But the townsfolk wouldn't care. They would say, "Ever since that stranger came, the fires came too." That evening, Cray confronted Silas in the cemetery near the war memorial. "You said you came to stop the fire, but another family just burned." Silas's jaw tightened. "Wasn't me." "I know, but they won't believe that." Silas looked toward the distant canyons, where Duke's ranch empire sat fat on stolen land. "Duke's testing me, trying to make me the villain." Cray nodded. "And if he succeeds, this town will hang you before the week's out." Silas finally met his eyes. "Then we end this, one way or another." They say the wind in Ash Hollow carries voices, whispers of vengeance, loss, and the fire that never dies. And that on one fateful night, it screamed louder than ever before. The town awoke to the sound of thunder, not from the sky, but from hooves. Duke Mallory's riders thundered through the valley with torches high, heading for the Crossridge Ranch, another plot that refused to sell. Smoke curled into the pre-dawn air. By the time the flames caught, the riders were already gone, and no one but Silas Reed was there to stop it. But this time, he didn't charge into the blaze. He watched. From the ridge above, still and silent, his rifle cradled across his knees. When Sheriff Cray reached the scene, The fire was spreading fast, devouring fences and trees. Silas remained perched on the ridge, eyes fixed not on the flames, but on the trail the riders had taken. "They want a war," he said when Cray reached him. "Tonight, I give it to them." Cray exhaled, weary. "You do this your way, we'll lose everything." Silas turned, and for the first time, his voice cracked with something like sorrow. "We already did." By high noon, the town square was nearly deserted. Doors shuttered, guns oiled. Fathers kissed daughters like it might be the last time. Silas stood alone in the middle of the street, his coat flapping in the rising wind. His eyes scanned the horizon. Calm, patient. The man had the look of someone who'd seen the worst of men, and was no longer afraid of meeting it again. And then they came. Duke Mallory and 6 riders, black hats and dust-choked scarves, swept in like a storm front. They dismounted with laughter that didn't reach their eyes. Duke stepped forward, arms wide. "You sure you want this dance, Reed?" Silas didn't move. "Only way fire ends is by burning the hand that lit it." "You think you're justice?" Duke sneered. "You're just a ghost too stubborn to stay dead." Silas's eyes hardened. "Ghosts don't bleed. Men like you do." The silence before the shootout was suffocating. 6 riders fanned out behind Duke. The wind picked up, swirling dirt and ash through the square. Silas stood alone, no cover, no backup. Then, a flick of the wrist. His rifle roared. One rider fell with a hole between his eyes before he even touched his trigger. Another tried to mount his horse. Silas's bullet punched through the saddle and into his spine. Screams tore through the silence. The others returned fire, but Silas was already moving, swift and silent. He ducked behind the trough, then rolled and fired again. Clean, precise, every shot made for war. Not one wasted. Sheriff Cray burst from the alley, revolver drawn, but hesitated. This wasn't a shootout. It was a reckoning. Within seconds, 5 men lay in the dust. Only Duke remained. He stood there, panting, gun in hand, blood splattered across his coat. "You kill me," Duke spat. "You'll just be another outlaw." Silas approached slowly, rifle lowered now. "No." He reached into his coat and pulled something small, a baned locket, blackened around the edges. "You burned my wife and son in Franklin's Crossing," Silas said, voice low, heavy. "They weren't soldiers, just people you wanted out of your way." Duke's face paled. "I was paid," he stammered. Silas raised the rifle, not to his shoulder, just high enough to remind Duke what justice looked like. "No more fires," Silas said. But he didn't shoot. He turned his back and walked away. Duke, hands trembling, raised his pistol. One last act of cowardice. But a shot rang out, not from Silas. Cray had fired. Duke collapsed, gun falling from his limp fingers. The town's silence was broken only by the wind. Later that night, under a fading orange sky, Cray found Silas at the edge of town, standing beneath the same warped tree where he once carved a boy's name. "You could have killed him," Cray said. "I did," Silas replied softly. "Just not how he expected." Cray handed him a fresh canteen. "Folks are talking about putting up a statue." Silas shook his head. "Don't. Let me be a story, not a symbol." "You leaving?" Silas looked west. "I've got one more fire to put out." Cray hesitated. "You know, you could stay. Help rebuild." Silas offered a faint smile. "Men like me aren't built for peace." He paused. "But when your town needs saving again, listen to the wind." Weeks later, the town rebuilt. The Larkins returned to a new home. The preacher rang the bell again. And the children, they whispered the tale like it was scripture. A man with no name. A rifle that spoke only when needed. A ghost who walked into fire and walked out with justice.